The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
I sound like Robin Williams from Good Morning Vietnam. Remember that?
Good morning. Yeah, that was such a good
Classic.
movie.
Oh, classic. One of his best roles.
Now, he was someone who just had a different way of looking at the world. I loved that about him. Still do.
Do you think he was on the spectrum?
Maybe. I mean, certainly in the potentially ADHD category, but I have no way of formally diagnosing him. I don't want to. But a lot of his genius was just his energy and his ability to just not conform.
Right. Yeah, he was such a brilliant comedian. Oh, man. But he was so fast.
And imaginative, the things he would come up with when someone would just let him go. You know, they talked about on movie sets about how the director would get a cut they liked, but then after that, do whatever you want. And he could come up with 1,000 different hilarious bits or jokes or improvs.
Can you imagine being an actor trying to keep up with him?
No, that sounds like a nightmare. Or not break when you're in a scene with him.
Right.
Oh, he was also an incredibly caring person. So it's not like he had to trade one for the other, you know?
Yeah.
Speaking of people who don't conform with typical ways of interacting with the world.
Yeah. On today's show, we're actually going to be talking about the topic of sensitives.
Yeah, and just how prevalent neurosensitivity could be. You may not realize that you're particularly sensitive to something. Like, I don't know if you have a certain thing that irritates you out in the environment. I know that just certain noises will really kind of rile me up.
Like your husband talking?
My husband's voice. Like nails on a chalkboard. No. No, I celebrate when he speaks. Yeah. Is there anything that gets you kind of irritated?
Life in general. But no, I think...
but in terms of like your senses, you know.
I can't stand certain smells. And I think I'm actually really, really sensitive to certain things.
Yeah.
That really bugs me. And I almost have like a physical reaction. Like I actually get like pissed off, if that makes any sense, about certain things. Well, okay. I cannot stand the smell of cat food and cat litter.
Oh, no. Are you a masochist? What's happening here?
Yet I live with 2 cats. So I struggle with this every day, Michelle. So, but I'm very sensitive to it.
My kids like to eat those packaged seaweed products, and the smell of it just makes me gag. I get actually physically agitated. So I get that. And so there's a spectrum, right? I mean, we're talking about more kind of minor things, but I'm excited for our guests to dive into neurosensitivity in a more meaningful way than we're talking about it, and really distinguish when it's, you know, a minor inconvenience versus something that's really distressing in your life, and how we can support those folks.
When you put it like that, Michelle, I have to listen now.
It wasn't talking about cats that got you hooked.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kel and Michelle.
I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 2 decades.
And I'm the show producer and co-host.
Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships,
why we do what we do,
and what causes people to unrelate.
Joining us today is Judy Lipson. She is a licensed professional counselor with more than 30 years of experience and the owner of Spiral Wisdom. As a private counselor and educational strategist, she works with public and private schools, students and their families, and with adults. Welcome, Judy, to Unrelating.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, we've been trying to book Judy for a while now. I know we've been going back and forth, so we're excited to finally have her on the podcast, Michelle.
I'm so excited. I'm not going to lie, I'm also nervous.
Well, that makes 2 of us.
Yeah. Okay, good. No, full disclosure. I know Judy personally, and I respect and admire her so much that like I get that insecurity when you have another person and professional around you that you admire, because you're like, oh, the likelihood of me saying anything intelligent in front of this person is very low. So you get in your head about it. But yes, I feel like an inkling to want to impress you, but at the same time, I know how gracious and wonderful you are. So you're not going to judge me if I don't.
No. So how about we level the field with, I'm thinking similarly, because I have huge respect for you, Michelle, and your deep dives and the work you do, and then the two of you together with your podcast, because I think you do a great job of interviewing and summarizing and deep diving. And this is my first time maybe live talking, answering questions. It's being taped. So, Michelle, we're just going to kind of put all that aside and we're sitting in the living room.
Exactly. It's a conversation. We've had many of those, so we can do this.
Hi, Kelly. You're joining us for a personal conversation with Michelle and I.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the good news is that you both are therapists, so you can work this out together, right? These
right. No, but this is something I love about Kelly. He's just so curious and interested in these things. And I think in particular, I've been wanting him to meet you because I think it's what you do is really just going to not just blow his mind, but really interest him, and on a deeper level.
Good segue, Michelle. Wow, you set that up on a tee for me. So let's just start there, Judy. I'm really curious. Spiral wisdom, where does that name come from?
I was an extremely anxious person, kid, young adult. It's something that I've really worked with and worked at for decades. I was working with a therapist, and she was talking to me about the potential of looking at past life regressions. And before I could actually try past life regressions, I needed to learn how to get into that relaxed space. And it used to really freak me out. And it took me a year to learn how to relax and kind of quiet my mind and just allow that quiet space. And this was before there was internet and people were writing things up much. And when I would finally go into that quiet space, I would start to see these visual images. And this one visual image that kept coming up was a spiral. If you look on my website or any of my stuff and you see the spiral, it's a very specific number of whorls that goes in a specific direction. And that's what I used to see. But you couldn't Google, what's the meaning of spiral? So I looked it up in books and I found Pythagorean theorem and the mathematical thing starts with an F, I think.
Fibonacci sequence.
Thank you. And that kind of stuff. So fast forward then 20 years later, I decided to start a private practice. I was working in the schools as a special educator and then a teacher consultant. And my certification is to teach the emotionally impaired, but we would work with all types of disabilities and different abilities in our classroom or as a consultant. And so then I got my licensed professional counselor certification. And I was looking to open a private practice to not just be in the schools. And I was talking with a group of spiritual friends of mine. I had a little women's circle. And I said, I got to come up with a name. And they said, well, you love spirals, so maybe you need to come up with something with spiral. And I'm like, that's brilliant. And somehow or other, that phrase came up, spiral wisdom. And it really feels like it just encapsulates me and what I believe and what I do, because the spiral can also represent that you begin a path, a journey, and then you go deeper and you go more expansive. And it taps into how it connects to things, it connects to this situation, then it connects to a bigger situation, and then a bigger situation.
The way I visualize it too is not just a 2D spiral, but if you 3D a spiral and it could end up being a cone that is either going down to something or up to something. I just love that visual.
Yeah, I think so. When I developed my website, and I had lots of help with it, but when I developed it, it was very important to me to present myself as the professional that I am with strategies and techniques and knowledge and information that is traditional enough to be able to work with kids and adults with ADHD and autism spectrum and anxiety.
What's your main focus when you work with kids or with families?
So it started out ADHD, autism, and anxiety, and focusing mostly on success in school and helping to match style of learning to style of teaching and the curriculum. As a teacher consultant, that was our role, was to figure out all those pieces and help bring them together. So that's where my practice really started. And then it began to morph more and more and more. Even back when I was in the schools, that's when I really started to identify what at the time I called sensitives. Now, We have terminology that includes neurodivergence. And usually neurodivergence is referring to folks on the autism spectrum, but now even neurodivergence is expanding out to refer to different groups in addition to just autism, which I love. And somewhere along the way, people started calling them neurosensitives. But I started off before any of that stuff was being termed or it talked about. I recognized my students and myself as sensitives. So as sensitives, the way I look at that is these are folks who are highly attuned to one or more of the five senses. So going through each one, in no particular order, a person who is visually attuned and visually sensitive is going to walk into a room and see everything that is in that room. They can't help it. They're not trying. They're not looking for it. And they see everything. There's a book called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And it's a fabulous way of understanding the experience of Asperger's syndrome, which is like high functioning autism. And by the way, Asperger's no longer exists in the DSM diagnostic manual. It was rolled into autism. But if you want to understand that high functioning or what used to be referred to as Asperger's, this is a fictionalized story that's written about a 14-year-old boy who is trying to solve a mystery in his neighborhood. As you read it, he's talking about like he goes into somebody's home to ask questions and to get more information. And he notices that where there's a framed painting or picture on the wall, that he can see that it had been moved a quarter of an inch or a half of an inch, that nobody else had noticed. So it's a very hands-on kind of descriptive way of really understanding the visual aspect of one of those five senses. They see everything. They see things that maybe you weren't expecting. Auditory, that's folks who either hear things that other people don't hear, like the high frequency pitch of fluorescent lighting. Like in my case, I am very sensitive to sound. So if I'm walking down a city street and I hear an emergency vehicle coming in the distance, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder to see how far away it is. I can hear it a couple blocks away. We all can. That's the point. And is it coming in my direction? Because if it is, I have to get my hands free so I can put my fingers up in my ears as it goes by. Where my family or my friends, whoever I'm walking with, they continue having a conversation. They're not even paying attention to the fact that this loud noise is coming by and it's not hurting their ears.
Yeah.
So that's the auditory aspect. Smell. I'm very sensitive to chemical smells. Certain fragrances, flower fragrances, I'm not a big fan of, but food fragrances I can handle really well. And so these are folks who are highly attuned and sensitive to smells. Taste, something that typically only parents are even aware of. These are the kids who eventually can still become adults and have this issue where they avoid certain foods because of the taste or the mouth texture. And then the last one is tactile or touch. These are the folks who don't like the tags inside their shirts, appliques. The inside of an applique on a sweatshirt might be kind of crusty and stiff. Waistbands, socks, shoes, all kinds of different things. By the way, one little tip that I've learned from parents for socks is you turn them inside out and then the kids can't feel the seams.
Oh, that's a great tip.
And a lot of times it has to do with the tightness and also the fabric that kids and adults are wearing. I know a lot of families who have basically one pair of pants, but they have 5 pairs of the same pair of pants and the same shirt and the same Disney costume and the same, all those things. So when you think about the fact that you might have an individual who's highly attuned to one or more of those 5, and that information as a sensory input is coming at them literally, apparently 24/7. There is no break. And I remember when I first read about that, and I thought that was so interesting because it makes sense. we are designed that even while we're sleeping, if you're a parent, you are going to wake up and hear your child crying. Even if you are sound asleep, some part of your nervous system is paying attention to see if you can, to make sure you hear that. Some part of your nervous system is paying attention in case you smell smoke or a different loud noise. So we are designed to be taking in this information, but somebody who has this much information coming through is having a lot of input and impact on their nervous system, and it becomes oftentimes very overwhelming. And so I called these folks sensitives, and I looked at it as a continuum that you could have a little bit of sensitivity, you might have a lot of sensitivity. I think most autistics probably have that lot of sensitivity. So I believe that not all sensitives are on the autism spectrum, but all autistics probably are super sensitive. I don't do the research. I cannot prove to you that that's true, but I'd be really, really surprised if that wasn't true.
Well, I think too, before a parent truly understands that that might be what's happening to their child, they, out of whatever reason, attribute it to other things, power struggles, or, the tantrum that comes with that discomfort. Is the child being difficult or a behavioral challenge? And so we put all these labels on kiddos that are in distress until we can, have some assessment or some understanding that that's what's going on for them.
As an educator who was trained to work with the emotionally impaired, our key thing that we were taught was we were looking at behaviors and we were looking at emotions, and it was our job to find the antecedent. What's the thing that came before? What's the why? And so that's exactly what it's about, Michelle. As I worked more and more with sensitives and began to understand more and more about sensitives and putting pieces together from trauma specialists who I was like, oh my gosh, I never even realized that when I went to a training with Bessel van der Kolk, who's a trauma specialist, and he was talking about his patients who have undergone trauma. And I now call those the big T traumas, like war and assault and severe illness and those kinds of things. And as he discussed what was happening in the body, in the nervous system, the behaviors, the physical, somatic sensations and experiences, as well as the thoughts and the feelings, I'm listening to him talk about this regarding the big T traumas. And I thought, oh, these are my kids. These are my students, because at that time I was mostly working with kids and adolescents, only a very few adults at that time. And I thought, oh, these are my kids. He is describing what I see in them, but they're doing it from lots of little T traumas. So I even wrote an article that I put in my website called Big T/Little T Traumas that talks about this aspect of it. It's a lot of input on the nervous system. The nervous system overreacts. Sorry, that feels judgmental. And the nervous system responds appropriately and correctly because the nervous system has one job, and that's to determine, am I safe? And it does a really good job with it. Yeah. However, in my opinion, it never evolved. So it still sees danger cues in something like the teacher asking you to stay after class, or the boss asking you to please stay at lunchtime or at the end of the day to come in for a meeting, or the parent who says, could you please, we will continue this when you come home. And the amygdala, which is that part in the limbic system, that fight and flight center of the nervous system, is going, oh my God, it's a bear. I'm done for. I'm a goner. And it's not. It's just scary, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. But we are wired to see it as a true danger that I'm going to die.
When that is sort of the baseline of your brain, the schema that you're working out of, I mean, on a good day, for a lot of us, uncertainty is uncomfortable. We might be able to tolerate it to a certain extent, but it still doesn't feel good not to know what's going to happen next. So when you think that a brain is already up at a level of heightened sensitivity, or that uncertainty could feel like more danger.
So that's kind of been my new role, it feels like, is to help the individual themselves regarding of their age. I can have this conversation with a 4 and 5-year-old. I can have this conversation with a 75-year-old and all places in between, to help us and the parents and the spouse and the loved one and the people who work with them. Maybe somebody who's trying to get a job and who has a job coach and they need to understand better what's going on. Whoever is engaging, and the person themselves, to have that conceptual context.
Yeah.
To understand the why and to teach people to look for the why. And that way also, it helps take away those negative feelings that we might otherwise have of, can't you just control yourself? Can't you just behave? Can't you just listen? Can't you just calm down? Oh, we hate that. Can't you just calm down?
If only it was that easy, right? Calming down.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that you've told me that, sure, I'll calm down.
Yeah.
Judy, I love how you've kind of set up for the dumb and me what neurosensitives are. How do you diagnose somebody? What's your process for that?
To the best of my knowledge, there is no true diagnosis. So in my mind, neurosensitive is more of a description. It's a foundational understanding that I can talk to either one of you or anybody else and say, all right, here's what I'm seeing. It is amazing, like I did with you. And I said, here's the 5 senses. And here's kind of a quick descriptor of each one. And you watch the people in front of you and the parents are going, oh my gosh, you're right, you're right, you're right. And the kid or the adult that you are potentially describing is going, absolutely, you're right. And what I then do is slow it down. Tell me more. Tell me how this is apropos for you. And what is your personal experience? And what does it feel like? This is one of the new things I'm learning to ask. How does it feel in your body? When I first went into the therapeutic world, either as a client and then later as a clinician to learn and then do the work, we were always taught it's about how you think about things and how you feel about things. And more recently, people are talking about, and how does it sit in the body? And how does the body respond? And now they talk about it even, how does the nervous system respond? So that's like that next question I always ask. And how does it feel in your body? And what do you notice? And one of the things I keep hearing is, it feels like there's movement in there, a vibration. There's a shakiness. And I just find that so interesting.
I've worked with a lot of parents of little ones, 0 to 5, who we do a lot of developmental and social emotional screenings. And there's a segment that feels very relieved when you're making sense or they can relate. Yes, that's my kid. I know we had one recently, the other sense proprioceptive, where we're like, that could be someone, a kiddo who's just banging into things all the time, doesn't seem to understand that their arm is about to go get crushed.
Yeah, they don't know where they are in space.
Exactly. Yeah. And we'll see a parent be like, yes, that's my kid. So there's a lot of relief. We've also run into parents who are very reluctant to get their children screened, or there's a stigma or a lot of fear around, what if my kiddo does end up being on the autism spectrum disorder? And so working with, like you said, working with the caregivers, working with the romantic partners of the person who you're working with is really an important part, because they're having a lot of feelings and in their body. I love that you made that point about the weight of what's going to happen now that I better understand.
I love that you brought up proprioception. You pronounced it a tiny bit differently than I do. That's cool.
I probably pronounced it wrong. So
I probably am. but I now know 3. So and I did a presentation yesterday with a bunch of clinicians, that's therapists. And the second one, which I learned from an occupational therapist, an OT, is interoception, however you pronounce that one. Do I understand, do I recognize the sensations and the feedback inside my body? Hot and cold, I'm full, I'm hungry, I need to go to the bathroom, those kinds of things. And pain, some people don't feel pain or don't get that signal.
Yeah.
And I find that so interesting. I don't know particularly what to do with it other than to say, oh, I think you might have some interoception issues, and let's find you an OT or somebody different who can actually work on that. And then as I've been studying something called polyvagal theory, and he talks about a third way that our nervous systems communicate with us back and forth and with our brain and our body, is neuroception. And it's receiving information that's not at that cognitive level that you're really hearing and thinking and knowing about and recognizing necessarily. So some of it is that sensory stuff that you're not paying attention to. But neuroception is basically the information that's happening inside. So that's kind of interoception. Outside, sensory, what's happening out here between us and our environment, and then the in-between. It's this idea that there's so much invisible stuff which is happening in our worlds and in our nervous systems, and a lot of it is bringing it to the awareness of the loved one, awareness of the self, so that as soon as I do, I have an understanding of myself with some words. That always makes things easier. I have an understanding of this person I care about, and I don't have to take things quite as personally. And I probably won't take things quite as personally, or self-judgment if it's about me.
I want to back up a little bit. It sounds to me when you describe as sensitive, it's somebody who has heightened senses. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that a good thing to have heightened senses in some ways? Because I would think, like, in my mind, I'm picturing like Spider-Man or somebody who Superman, who can hear really, somebody screaming, a mile away. And again, I'm not trying to make fun of, I'm not trying to downplay this at all. I'm just thinking, like, from a real world kind of approach, isn't some of this stuff actually useful?
Yeah, it's the superpowers.
Yeah, superpower. Okay, there you go.
And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I remember where I was speaking, and it was a group of parents and educational professionals. So there were psychologists and social workers and speech and language therapists and teachers and special education teachers and some lay people there as well. And I was talking about the five senses, and I think I was talking about the visual. Kind of the people in the room were kind of like, oh, maybe we need to take all the things off our walls and make stuff less exciting to look at, and maybe they can focus better. And I was like, no, we still have to have novelty and interest, but just be aware. And this one fellow, I think it was about this, and he said, this is what makes police detectives and military people so good at what they do, because they are honed in, and they are seeing the different, the one thing that's different. Like the kid in the book, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, the fictional character based on real type of life stuff, who sees that picture had been moved a half an inch.
Yep.
So yes, these are superpowers, and they are very, very beneficial. And they can be dysregulating. And what that means is that anything in moderation, or as my son once said a long time ago, everything in moderation, including moderation. So these things are really helpful in the world. And when we can find what is our superpower, we can have great jobs, and work never feels like work, because you're doing what you love and you're doing what aligns with your strength. But because it doesn't stop and you can't turn it off, and also that our world is not necessarily designed to be supportive of people who have all these heightened awarenesses. And so as a result, it can be a lot. And then the nervous system starts to get those cues of danger, because that's how we're designed, is to look for those, to make sure we don't get mauled by the bear. So we're designed to be on the lookout all the time for that.
Yeah.
There's all these fancy terms like negative bias. We're going to look for that stuff, whether we mean to or not. It's what our nervous system does.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right, Kelly. These are great superpowers until they become dysregulating.
So this word dysregulating, I'm glad you brought it up because I want to flip it. You have a great perspective on emotional regulation that I hope you can share, because a lot of people hear that and either dismiss it as like a clinical term. I don't know what that means. But a lot of people think emotional regulation is like keeping your feelings inside or stuffing them down so that you don't act out. That's not what emotional regulation actually is. But, and this might get into your work as an empath, you described it in a way that really resonated with me in terms of what you let in and how you deal with stuff that's already in there and let it out.
I primarily worked at high school, particularly in the later years of my career. So I had these adolescents who were telling me that they really struggled because of the sounds that were happening in the classroom and around them, or the visual, or the tactile, or these things. And as I started to put their stories together and I'm listening to them and starting to ask some more questions, I'm hearing things like, can I come talk to you, Mrs. Lipson, because I'm really upset right now. My friend was just sharing with me her challenges and how emotionally upset she is. And she's so depressed and she's so anxious and he's this and he's that. And I began to realize that those who tend to be sensitives seem to also have a tendency to be more empathic. They're the people who everybody wants to come talk to. So I started to look at their sympathy where, oh, that I'm so sorry, that must be so difficult. There's empathy. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I can imagine how hard that must be. And then there's an empath who feels it inside their own body. And as I began to talk to more and more sensitives and become more aware of who I am and how I interrelate with the world, and always did, but it took me a while to start to figure it out and name it, that we who are empaths pick up stuff, kind of that superpower, Kelly. We pick up stuff that maybe other people don't pay attention to or don't pick up or don't realize that they are. So we who are empaths, it's not just the words we're hearing somebody say, and it's not just their body language or their tone. It's more than that. We feel it. You either have it or you don't, and you feel it and you kind of sense it and you know something, and it's not based on the words or the tone.
Once someone's figured out that perhaps they're an empath,
yes.
So now they're taking in a lot of that. They're a container for that. And so that's inside them now. You have mentioned just ways to kind of protect your well-being by being more intentional about what you let in. And also, how do you release what you're already holding on to also protect your well-being?
The imagery that was given to me was to imagine the blowhole of a dolphin or a whale. And we know that when it comes out of the water, it opens up and exhales and inhales. And before it goes back into the water, it closes back down again. So I invite folks, and listeners are welcome to join in if they wish. And we're just playing. We're playing in the world of imagination and possibility. And yet what's so interesting is in that world of, it really can work. Where, as you notice, so the first thing is just paying attention to, at your gut, how big do you feel that opening is? There's no right or wrong answer. There's no good and bad answer. There's just how it feels for you at this moment. And then imagine, if you will, that this opening, this blowhole, is starting to get a little bit bigger and it's expanding. And notice, how does that feel? How does that feel in your gut? How does that feel in your beingness? Maybe your security? How does that feel? And then continuing to play with it. Now let's close it back down very slowly, just a little bit, going back to where you started. And then let's see, how does that feel when you close it down even a little bit further? And then how does that feel in your body? And you just continue to go back and forth a little bit while you experiment. And the first thing is realizing, oh, I guess I do take this information into my being. The second is, oh, apparently I have some control or say as to how much, because people who are empaths will always tell you, once you start the conversation that maybe they've never had before or even thought about before, they will always tell you, yeah, gosh, it's so overwhelming. And by the end of the day or the end of a session or the end of a class period or the end of a whatever, I'm exhausted and I feel icky. And it's really difficult. That's when the superpowers can be dysregulating and can become a real challenge. So if we can learn that we don't have to take all that in, that we really only need a little bit of information to know, does my loved one or my client or my student or whomever this is this, I only need a little bit of information to know, do I offer a hug when that's an appropriate relationship? Do I offer a listening ear? So it's this understanding that I don't need a whole lot of information and I don't need to completely open myself up.
Helping empower someone that there's a choice also gives them permission to remove the masochistic piece. Mm-hmm. Because if you're a caring professional, part of your identity is tied to being a caring person. And so I think it can be kind of a negative feedback loop. Like, as a caring person, I have to take all of this in.
So I had spent, years talking to people, explaining about this, and them looking at me and going, oh my goodness, this is so helpful. No one's ever explained it to me. Thank you very much. And I'm like, awesome. And then I get this little munchkin who comes to see me, and he comes home every day from school and he has meltdowns. And mom, who's very spiritual and very empathic, is figuring that he's probably picking up everybody's energy and trying to take care of everybody. And so I very gently explain to him this whole process and tell him, you don't have to take it all in. It's not your job. And he just looks right at me and says, no, it is my job. And I'm like, no, honey, no.
Bossy pants.
What's that?
Mr. Bossy Pants.
He says, no. I said, no, honey, it's not your job. It really isn't. It's just get the information and then you don't need that much. And he said, no, this is my job. And I maybe tried a third time and I was like, this is not happening. And I looked.
It's very entrenched.
Yeah, especially with little kids. But a lot of my clients, the parent is in the room, even with like the adolescents or the young adults, because then they hear things modeled and they're living life with them for all those other hours. It depends. But anyway, so mama's in the room and I give her a look and she gives me a look like, So this is one of those moments when I tap into my higher wisdom and I go to my guides and my source for intuition and that kind. I've already done what I learned, how I've applied it, and it's not working because he says, no, it's his job. So I check in and I come back to him and I said, okay, so assuming that it's your job, do you really need to hold on to it? Could we arrange that you let it go and it comes in and it goes directly out again? And he did the best thing in the whole wide world. He looked up at his higher wisdom, checks it out, turns back to me and goes, yes, we can do that. So so the first one where you take the blowhole, let's say, I call that energy modulation. I don't know if it was taught to me with those words or that's what made sense. And then this other part where we drain it out. I hate this terminology. It's so cold and dumb, but draining the receptacle. So if you're one who is taking in all this empathic information from others and you're pulling it inside yourself, you don't need to. And we certainly deserve to be able to empty that out. And when we're dealing with metaphysical, and energetic concepts, we don't have to deal with the 3D laws that we abide by. Laws meaning like we know that gravity goes down. So it would make sense that we would make the opening of our receptacle like at the base of our torso. But you don't have to. You might think differently, and maybe you're like, no, I want to empty it out my shoulder.
Yeah, or you breathe out.
Some people, create like a small opening, and others are like a gigantic opening. And some people create like a colander or a sieve where there are openings all around their whole torso. So we start with, as an empath, you're probably really full already. Let's drain it. And some people want to drain the whole thing at once. And some people only want to drain part of it, and they'll come back to it again. And then we set an intention that at the end of every day, maybe with a bath or a shower, or just with intention, you cleanse it out until you learn as it comes in, it only stays long enough to know what it's about and how I might respond, and then you let it go back out again. And people who practice this feel so much lighter, and they don't feel, oftentimes, it can land in the body somatically. It can become a physical sensation, even though we're just talking about energy and emotions are energy. So it becomes a very interesting thing. And I have a little video. It's about 7 minutes on my website and on my newsletters. It's always linked to that as well. Those come out once a month, called Energy Modulation and Draining the Receptacle. So crass.
Yeah, but it's a concrete way of thinking about it. Yeah. So
I guess to tie it back in sort of to the tips and techniques, I guess what advice would you give or what tips would you give for your clients or for parents who may be dealing with a neurosensitive child or a friend?
Or a spouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these techniques and suggestions really don't matter how old the person is. It's just how you apply it and who kind of takes more responsibility, the adults around, or the individual themselves. So if they tend to be empaths and they're taking in too much stuff, we already talked. So separate from the five senses, the empathic, intuitive, energy aware aspects, I might teach them energy modulation and draining the receptacle. That's huge. For those who aren't ready to hear that level, because that's a little out there, I get it. And for people who are like, no, I don't want to talk about that, or they're not ready to hear something like that, it's really about, are there ways to reduce how much input that person is receiving? So if they have a preference of a certain kind of clothing, a certain fabric, a certain style, a certain type, go with it. Let's pick what our battles are. We can't get rid of all of the sensory input. You can't, possibly. The idea is to take away as many difficulties, as many aspects in their world that they might be struggling with as possible. So you look at the 5 areas of senses. Might they benefit visual? Some kids and adults are very attuned to glare and have difficulty with white paper and fluorescent lighting. Fluorescent lighting is bright and it also pulsates. And some people are very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
One of the things when I present, oftentimes I'll say, if you only remember one thing, and then I do like 3 different ones. But one thing is, if you can get rid of fluorescent lighting and put natural lighting or incandescent regular bulbs, not CFLs, compact fluorescent, those little curly Q bulbs, that's just still fluorescence. If you can get rid of those and do regular lighting or natural lighting from windows, that is just automatically calms down a room. And I see that when I present, and when I present live in like a ballroom or one of those conference areas, we'll turn down half the banks of light, and you can just see everybody in the room
it's like,
goes,
Yeah.
Michelle's doing it too. Yeah. So auditorily, they might need to wear noise canceling headphones or AirPods or earbuds. There are a whole bunch of different brands and kinds that people can use. And one is not the same as another because my ears might be sensitive to a certain texture or size or type. And I know kids and adults who like a certain kind of earbud and some who like the over the ears, the whole headphone. Tactile, we already talked about clothing. Don't fight that if you can help it. And there may be days when they have to wear a certain kind of clothes. See if you can reduce all the other challenges that they're going to have so that they can put up with that for that one day or that 1-2 hour span. I like to recommend that the individual of any age take breaks throughout the day if possible. Fidgets. So there's a behavior called stimming, which is movements that stimming is shortcut for self-stimulating. There are certain things in the world of autism, you'll see kids who flap their hands or they rock. And one specialist who talks about autism said, you should try what they're doing because you may actually find that it does feel good to your body to do that, even though maybe you don't need to do it. And if you take it away from them so that they cannot, they will find a different stim, which might be worse. So keep that in mind. So sometimes a way that kids and adults can stim is like with fidgets. And maybe I like to recommend fidgets that don't make noise because the sound sensitive people are going to be distracted by the soundy fidget. And the visually sensitive people might be distracted by one of those ones that like the wheels that turn, fidget spinners. So find a fidget that's as quiet as you can that allows their nervous system to focus on something. They may need to take breaks away from people because people are emotions and energy and actions and movement and unknowns. And sometimes you need to get a break away from them. So maybe take 5 minutes every hour or 15 minutes every half day where you just go and you find a quiet, dark space or just at least a quiet space by yourself where you can just maybe close your eyes and just breathe and find ways to quiet down your nervous system so that you can get back in the hubbub again.
I think we should all do that.
We're all dealing with nervous system input. It's just that some people are more sensitive to it than others. But you're right, Kelly. It applies to everybody.
Yeah. Those are such great tips. The one I would add for loved ones, it would be not to assume malintent, to not assume that the person is trying to irritate you or push your buttons when they're having a hard time.
Yeah. And that's part of the contextualizing of things. What is it about? Where did it come from? Why is it happening? I have an article where I talk about tantrums versus meltdowns. And I've come to the point where I wonder if there really are true tantrums or if almost every tantrum is a meltdown. Because a tantrum implies, oh, you're not going to make me do that. I'm going to make your life miserable. But a meltdown is when that one last straw happened. And the meltdown might have occurred, for instance, when you said, no, you can't have another cookie. I want a cookie. No, you can't have another cookie. I want a cookie. And then they appear to tantrum, but they're having a meltdown. But if you look back, they waited too long to eat. They're overstimulated. They're exhausted. They've just come back from a whole day of preschool or school where there was expectation. You have to sit still. You have to listen. You can't talk now. You need to answer these questions. You don't really understand what's going on. Now you're feeling bad about yourself. Maybe you're having some fine motor difficulties along the way. Maybe you're having reading difficulties or processing difficulties. And any one of these by themselves is a no big deal. But when you start adding the layers of everything, so that was kind of the point at the beginning about what do you do and how do you address it? Is there one layer, 2 layers, 3 layers that you can start to pull away so it's more manageable for the individual?
Another layer we haven't talked about is like, what about like their blood sugar levels?
Thank you.
You mentioned they didn't eat. What about if they're
Sleep.
there's so many other factors that could influence someone's behavior, right? I mean, imagine someone who hasn't eaten all day, their blood sugar is going to be really low. They're going to get cranky.
It's about not taking things personally and asking the question why, and then asking more questions about why, because it probably isn't just one thing. And if it is, it is relatively easy to address and get past, but it usually is not one thing. Or they have no idea how to address it, which brings up explicit instruction. We have to teach people. We have to teach kids. We have to teach adults the how to, not just say, go talk to your teacher about why you got that grade, or because the teacher might not be a warm fuzzy and they're afraid to approach. They may not know what words to use. They may not know yet the tone or the body language, and they just get squished. We need to teach our kids and our adults, because if they knew how to, they'd be doing it. So if we just tell them, well, go do this,
Exactly.
and they're not doing it, it's probably because they don't know how. So scaffolding, giving them the how-tos, the steps, practicing it, role play, model it for them, then role play it with them. A lot of times I'll model it, then I'll get out like 2 stuffed animals. Which one do you want to be you? And which one will be the other person? And I play both roles. Then I hand their stuffed animal to them. And then they have their stuffed animal. And this is what adults do. Sometimes we don't do a stuffed animal. Sometimes we do things that are in the room or around, Okay, so I'm the pen and you're the AirPods. But it's about making it visual and role-playing it through until they can put the stuffed animal or whatever down, and they can do it with me. And sometimes we'll do a little devil's advocate of, okay, let's imagine that person says that thing in a way that you're not going to like. What might you do? Or who else could help you in this at school or at work or at the dinner table?
It also makes me think of the importance of the relational aspect of everything we're talking about, how integral co-regulation is to any relationship, parent-child, romantic partners, whatever. For the caregiver or spouse to be able to not match or exacerbate a situation that may be escalating, but like you said, teaching tools where co-regulation can happen. Also because that's a critical part of getting someone back to a baseline where they feel safe.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to get to the other parts of the brain where they will be able to think critically or process what's happening.
Yeah. If we can keep co-regulation in our back pocket, that is like how to everything. Co-regulation is the recognition that if my nervous system is calm and relaxed and breathing slowly and regularly, then your nervous system will by definition be automatically invited to be like mine. Mm-hmm. So that's not always easy to do, because if you're triggering me like crazy, I may not have the wherewithal to be able to co-regulate and be my calm self. Like Kelly said, if I'm hungry, if I'm tired, if I'm not feeling well, if I've just come home from a long day's work and I haven't had a little bit of me time yet, it's going to be much harder to co-regulate. Mm-hmm. I'm reminded that in the world of polyvagal theory, there are 3 things that bring us to a feeling of safety. And we've talked about all of them today. One is context. What do I really understand in a truer sense, not as a I'm being attacked kind of sense. So it's context. Choice. Do I have a choice in this? Can you give me an either or as opposed to telling me what to do? And then my nervous system gets very nervous because I feel trapped. Context, choice, and connection. Do I feel a connection with the other person who's in front of me? Which you were bringing it up, Michelle, in terms of co-regulation. It's all the same stuff.
Judy, if you can define a little bit more, what is energy psychology? Because I think a lot of people don't know what that is.
It's an acknowledgement that we are more than the physicalness of our bodies and our systems, and that we are also the energy that moves through it and how much ease there is in that movement. That's what tapping does, is it helps move energy through the meridians of the body. I can't define for you how many there are, what their names are, what they do, but it's the same meridians that acupuncture people do in Chinese or Eastern medicine.
Yeah, and if I can point out, like these are very old ideas. The chakras, all of these things have been around for millennia, so it's not like
it's not the new age.
Exactly. And to wrap up, I had something that's unrelated. Ha ha ha. Judy, from your perspective, you mentioned having a women's group or a women's circle that is helpful to you, and I know that you keep that up even to this day, and how beneficial that's been to the participants.
It's about finding my people. And staying connected with my people when I can, because there are too many of us who still look at this kind of alternative, expanded understanding as woo-woo, like it's crazy, wrong. And it's just a different way, an expanded way of understanding how we work, how we do. I'm, I guess, at the edge of the branch that's experiencing more than what a lot of traditional people see in a traditional way. I see things, I can feel things, I'm aware of things. I can at least ask the questions and be curious about the answers, even if I don't know what they are. That to me is energy. That to me is maybe what energy psychology is trying to tap into. And that's why it's important for me to keep up the groups and the individual people that I have connections with, who I can talk about the really unique and creative things that I'm a part of that maybe I can't talk about quite yet on a podcast like this.
I also like that those groups offer safety and
community,
non-judgment, and a little bit of a challenge to push, to reflect and share vulnerabilities in that safe space.
Well, speaking of reflecting, Michelle, this has been a really, really interesting conversation. I learned a lot from neuroscience or how to use neurosensitives. Not knowing anything coming into this conversation, I feel a bit more educated and certainly more aware, I think, as you were talking, Judy, I was just thinking about the things that I do, or maybe things that my spouse does, or things that my cat does, or whatever. Things that I'm seeing out in the world. And I'm definitely, I'll be much more sensitive to sensitives.
Oh, I love that.
Another t-shirt.
Nicely put. Another t-shirt. Yes. I'll be more sensitive to sensitives.
Yeah, I did tell Kelly back when, a long time ago, I'm like, oh, I want to ask Judy to come, but I'm scared too. So I tabled it for a long time.
Well, I tabled it for quite a while because I was like, do they really want to be talking about this kind of stuff?
Yes.
I hope that people who might be interested in learning more about sensitives, I do a monthly newsletter that comes out the first of every month. And you go to the top of my website, which is either judylipson.com or spiralwisdom.com. And there's a link, and there's also newsletter archives that give the subject matters of some of the other things. I include my own articles, I include other resources, and things of interest that might have to do with ADHD, anxiety, autism, all ages, transformation, self-care, all of those kinds of things.
Judy Lipson is a licensed professional counselor with more than 30 years of experience and the owner of Spiral Wisdom. So thank you so much, Judy, for coming on.
Thank you, guys. This was a delight.
Thank you so much.
So we just talked to Judy, who is a therapist, about a topic that I know you especially were excited about.
Yeah, the neurosensitivity, I believe, is more prevalent than we think. And so I'm glad we were able to talk to her, give a sense to our listeners of what that even means, first of all, and then what that could look like and how to support someone who's neurosensitive. But yeah, it was a good opportunity to reflect. I have a feeling some people out there could relate to some of those pieces and might realize now that they are neurosensitive. And that would be a very helpful piece of information about yourself.
As she started describing what a neurosensitive or a sensitive is, and she was touching on the five senses, she mentioned certain characteristics, and I thought, like, oh, this person doesn't like to have to feel that the shirt tag,
Yeah,
right? And I thought, oh, that's me. I don't like having
exactly.
the shirt tag. It bugs the crap out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Or when she was talking about walking into a room and noticing little changes. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I think I can do that. I don't have a superpower. I'm not Spider-Man, but I definitely can tell when something is off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I thought it was so lovely that you brought that up, that it's not some terrible thing all the time, and that's the word she used, is superpower.
Right.
There are pros to being sensitive.
Yeah. I would say in many ways, there are more pros than cons. Do you think?
It depends on the person because it can feel very distressing.
Okay.
So I wouldn't consider myself neurosensitive. I think in the moments that I get overstimulated, whether that's by a sound or visually, I feel very dysregulated. So I feel a small sliver of what that could potentially feel like. I can't put myself in the shoes of someone where that is the feeling more often than it's not. Because if you can imagine that, that's difficult.
One that really stands out to me too is in terms of hearing certain sounds and having a response to that sound. I think many people can probably relate to that because you hear certain things and it really can trigger you, right? Like she mentioned sirens, which I think nobody wants to hear a siren. Some people maybe are even really more sensitive, especially dogs. They go crazy. They start howling, right?
Or fireworks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the level of distress that stimuli causes you will kind of determine whether or not you need extra support with that or you don't. And then it can vary. I think it's a spectrum. So, and you brought up a great point too about, all the other factors that might be involved in feeling distressed about that, your hunger, your sleep deprivation or whatever. Or I think people can relate to this. Sometimes your partner snoring has no effect on you at all. You can fall asleep. It's just background noise. And other times it's the only thing you can hear and it keeps you from falling asleep. And I'm not talking about my current partner, but I'm just saying in a general sense, sometimes we fixate on that stimuli. So you can't just say it's black and white. You either have this or you don't in terms of your reactions to things.
Listen to this conversation. I'm now realizing my cat is neurosensitive. Because every time he walks into a room, he immediately notices when something is different. And he literally keys on that. And it's the funniest thing. He'll walk into a room and he'll notice something's been moved, something's been added, something's been subtracted. It's very, and I'm thinking he's got a superpower. But he's a cat. So is he sensitive, Michelle?
I think so. I mean, I wouldn't say my cats are representative of all cats, but they don't have that ability.
He also is very aware of our behavior and our emotions, and he keys off that, but I think he's just, well, I think it's also a survival instinct, right? Because you, as a predator or as prey, you need to be very aware of what's around you and sounds and smells. And
well, was he a rescue?
Yeah.
So they're just hypothesizing could also have been part of his past before he came to you that, where he did feel threatened or something happened to him. So he has a heightened sense of threat in his environment.
Yeah.
Speaking of energy, though, I think my cats have negative energy. Not as in like bad juju, but more just like no energy. And that feels very universal to cats, like, sleeping for 20 hours a day. They'll be running around like, with whatever they call it, the zoomies, and just like stampeding around the entire house. And 5 seconds later, they're fast asleep.
That just sounds like your cat just went cat,
Yeah, exactly. So we could call that typical behavior. The point of the show was to highlight that there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of neurodiversity. So to talk about what is typical or not typical, I don't know how valuable that is in terms of trying to categorize people necessarily, but to just what you said at the very end, which is I'm going to walk around more aware. That's helpful. There's people out there who are neurosensitive, and if we can make environments more safe and accommodating and have more awareness, if someone is in distress because of some kind of stimuli, we can help support other people in that way.
Especially kids, because they're in an important phase in their life where they're developing. And adults, eventually you kind of figure out and you develop survival skills, right? But I think kids in particular are a bit more vulnerable, right?
Yeah. And I don't want to call out anyone specifically, but I'm about to do that. Amy Schumer, she's a comedian. She's spoken candidly about being married to someone who had autism spectrum disorder. And so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that she talked a lot about the struggles of having a relationship with someone that had some of those challenges. I appreciate that she was vulnerable in talking about that stuff, because a lot of people are in relationships with people who are neurosensitive or have ASD, and rather than exacerbate the situation with misunderstanding and judgment, Judy was talking about some tools to use to make those interactions more supportive and also better for you. It's not just for the person who's neurosensitive, but for your own well-being.
Yeah, she brought a lot of awareness to that.
And the idea of being more intentional about what you're letting in, and also how do you release what you're already holding on to? Those are two really important pieces of anybody's mental health.
So based on this conversation, what should people's takeaway be from this, I guess?
Well, you know me, I don't want to shit on other people. So.
Okay, let me rephrase that.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I would say two takeaways. One is there are tips and tools for supporting a neurosensitive in your life. And number two is exactly what I said, is personally finding out what you need to take in, what is your responsibility or ability to take in someone else's stuff, especially in a romantic relationship. You get this with the physical well-being that you're always talking about. How do you release what you're holding on to is super important, because it's going to ping in there. It's going to affect you physically. It's going to manifest somatically. It's going to affect your mental health. So these things, these emotions and thoughts that you're holding on to in your body, how do you let them go? Judy said, drain the receptacle. There's a lot of ways to talk about it, but that's an integral part of kind of emotional regulation and emotional maturity.
Kind of like letting the kids go out to recess and run around and get all that energy out. It's kind of the same thing. And
these things we're talking about are for everyone, not just neurosensitive people.
Again, great conversation, Michelle. Thank you so much. Really, I think it's cool when we have we have these guests on who are subject matter experts, like Judy. So she brings a certain expertise to a particular topic that I think is really, really important, and certainly opened my eyes to something that I knew nothing about.
I encourage people to go to her website and reach out to her for support. She's incredibly open to talking to people about this topic. If you're struggling with family, friends, or just life in general,
in a bad relationship and wondering what to do,
or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success,
then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating.
To be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube.